The end goal isn't supposed to be anything in particular. The end goal could be sleeping with lots of women. The end goal could be getting to date lots of women so that you learn about the type of woman you actually want in your life. The end goal could be the quality of woman because you actually want to find a woman who you would like to settle down with. It doesn't actually matter what the end goal is because the metrics that you use are going to change. They're going to be different depending on what you're after. Like I said, you use the same system if you're trying to make a sale or if you're trying to build a business or if you're trying to meet girls. So no, it doesn't actually matter what you're after. But this is not designed just to get lays or just to get makeouts or just to get dates. It's designed to get more of whatever it is that you actually want. You just got to measure the things that matter for that outcome.
All right, we have another question here. Is systematizing the greatest parallel between sales and dating?
Ooh, that's an incredibly good question. Is it the biggest parallel? You know, that's a really hard question to answer because I've never actually sat down and tried to list out what the biggest parallels are. I think it's one of the biggest lessons that sales has to give us. It's up there with the top 5. I can't tell you if it's the biggest or not, but it's been one of the most influential in my success, my personal development, and the development that I have with guys that I work with.
How has this process improved other areas of your life?
Wow. Yeah, that's a really good question. Well, obviously, I use this exact process in... Actually, you know, this process, I didn't learn this process from trying to get better with women. In fact, I used it in a far more profound part of my life. I started off in my early years after my first relationship with a serious anxiety disorder that led to horrible crippling depression, and I was trapped in my room for a number of months. And I stole this basic way of thinking to actually coach myself to get out of my room and start being a normal human being. Like, it never started about women or about girls or about business. So to that effect, that was the first area that I started using it. How did I do that? I actually measured my emotional state 6 times a day. I just made a note of it and what was happening. And I'd try something new every week. I'd try exercising, or I'd try meditating, and because we're awful judges of how we feel. How we think about the last week is really just dictated by how we feel right now. So I actually measured it 6 times a day, just set an alarm. And that was how I started testing and measuring consistently what worked and what didn't. And I credit that massively with escaping out of my bedroom with my anxiety. So that's been a really, really big one outside of business as well. Yeah.
Would working a pushy sales job be a good way to learn cold approach?
Yes. Yes, it is. I'm not a fan of the pushy salesman. Actually, I don't think sales is supposed to be pushy at all, so I'm not sure that I'm 100% eager on that term, pushy salesman. But any sales role where you have to do the approach, where you have to approach someone, yeah. Because it teaches you a couple of things. It teaches you not only how to handle and deal with rejection, which is rough. Every salesman has to go through it. But it also teaches you how to see the bigger picture. You know, if you understand, look, I'm going to approach this girl, and she may reject me, she may not. But I know that, you know, if I talk to 10 girls who I really like, you know, I know that 7 of them are likely to want to talk to me. Or in sales, you know, if I approach 10 people to sell them something, I know at least 2 of them are going to buy from me. You start to realize, you get rejection, but you get the good stuff, and the rejection is just a step along that journey to getting what you like, if that makes sense. It's an important thing that you learn with sales.
What else we got, guys?
You said that this was one of the top 5, so I'm curious to what the other 4 you have in mind.
Ooh, with sales? Sales parallels?
Sales, yeah, sales parallels.
Well, I mean, I've kind of mentioned 2 of them here, which was, one was learning to deal with rejection and learning to see the big picture. Boy, now I'm on the spot and jet lagged. I couldn't give you another 2 straight off my head. My brain is just not functioning 100%. But there are a massive number of parallels between sales and dating relationships. Probably learning to be persistent is a really big one. If you, for example, you've got to learn to hear no a lot of times, right? With girls, you're going to hear no a lot. No in a lot of different types of contexts. In sales, the same thing, no in a lot of contexts. And one of the things you're going to start to hear is the apprehensive no's, like the no, I don't know if I should. You know, like, hey, you know what? You're really cute. I'd love to grab your number. Let's catch up sometime. I don't know if I should. Yeah, that kind of no, the apprehensive no, the like, oh, I could totally be pushed over the line. Knowing how to turn that no into a yes, knowing how to persist without being like, because you're not going to go, give me a number, woman. You could, and it might work, but that's not always the best strategy, right? The best strategy is to be able to persist in a way that's playful, amicable, and non-offensive, right? And if you can do that, if you can master that, that's a really big skill set. So that would be another one that comes to mind, just to give you one more.
So what would be one of the biggest differences between a top salesman and theoretically he's bad with women? What would be, how would that be possible?
Okay, so it's been my experience that guys who are salespeople and guys who have run their own companies, who've started their own companies, again, a lot of similar skill sets, the easiest to coach. So often what it comes down to is they're bad with women because they've never actually ever put any effort in. But when I take these guys out, and of course I get guys like this, I do get awesome sales guys who are terrible with women. It happens lots of times. They do exist. It doesn't have to be that theoretical. But they get the biggest results the quickest. And the reason is because all they're doing is learning to apply the same skill sets in a different context. So yeah, it's totally possible. And often it's just lack of experience. It's like, I don't know, ice skating or rollerblading, right? You take someone who's used to ice skating and put them on rollerblades. It's going to be weird at first, but they'll get good really quickly. It's kind of a similar analogy, if that makes sense.
Good morning, Damien.
Yes.
How does systematizing improve things that seem like they're not quantifiable?
I believe, can you give me an example of what you call non-quantifiable?
The quality of woman you date. If you go on a first date, you have a system, you see her, you build rapport, you laugh, things are good, you get it, you go out. It's a good date.
Yeah.
But maybe she's not that interesting, or you don't have that connection. So if you're doing really well, you go to the first date, things go really well on most of your first dates or most of your second dates, but it doesn't seem like that's the type of person you want to date. How can you use a system to improve the type of women you date?
Okay, so I just want to rephrase the question just to make sure I've got it clear. Really what you're asking is how would you create metrics around the type of woman that you're meeting? Is that really?
That was my example, but your system, I think, what you're expressing here about measuring things and by measuring them they can be improved, works really well in business because you're ultimately after money, which is quantifiable. It's a number.
Yes.
It's a commodity.
Yeah.
But with dating women, if your end goal is phone numbers, that's quantifiable. If your end result or end desire is sex, that's quantifiable because you have this goal. But if what you're ultimately after is to be happier with the people that you're dating because of the chemistry or how you feel about them, how can you implement systems to get better results?
So what I do when I work, especially if I'm working with ladies, when I'm doing women's dating coaching, I still do the same thing. They still have to measure, and of course generally they're not after just trying to shag as many men as possible. So I use them as a great example. But what I do with them is they have to be very clear on a couple of things. They've got to be clear on what are the 6 biggest things they've got to have in a partner that is most appealing to them. And some of those things may actually be hard to quantify. Does that make sense? Like a really great sense of humor is really tough to quantify. But you know when she's got it. Right? So a lot of these things we know when she's got it, and we could tick it off or cross it off on a list. And then you've got to know the 5 things you absolutely won't put up with someone. And that's always the basis starting point, because most of the things like that you can qualify, if you can't count them, if someone else can't count them, usually you can. So even if you were so, and it's not very scientific, to have a spectrum of how much did I enjoy the date with this girl, right? In other words, I'm looking for girls who I enjoy at least 8 out of 10 my first date. Does that make sense? Or who I think about still for the next week, or whatever that measurement might be. I know it's not a scientific measurement, but I use this measurement with women all the time because you've got to have something to go on. You've got to have something to measure. And you can measure emotions. I mean, if you, for yourself, as long as you're the one doing the measuring, you can measure your emotions. Like I said, with my anxiety and panic attacks, I just measure how I was feeling 6 times a day. But you can still measure yourself. How did I feel after that date? No, it's not scientific. No, it's not going to stand up in a scientific experiment. But it's still going to be a very useful metric to be using. So yes, it's definitely not limited to things that are very superficial.
Real quick follow-up here.
Can you briefly discuss the things that you go over when you're coaching women?
Very interesting question. Okay, very quickly. So the thing is, men struggle with women is this meeting women on the whole. Meeting women is our biggest struggle, most of all for guys. For ladies, meeting men is not quite the same problem. You can show some side boob, a bit of leg, you're going to get guys interested. The biggest problem for ladies is finding the right quality of man, not a man at all. That's quite problem number one. Problem number two for ladies is what they tend to do is date the same guy over and over again with a different name. Okay, and the same guy has a common set of traits, and oftentimes if they've come to me for help, in fact almost every time if they've come to me for help, those set of traits are actually detrimental to her well-being, one way or another, to her emotional well-being, to her enjoyment of a relationship. You know, we've all kind of seen that where we have female friends who always seem to date complete douches. We've seen that, and yet it's over and over and over. So what happens for a woman is that most of the time, I should never generalize, but most of the time what happens is that if a number of triggers, and they're different for every woman, but once those triggers get flipped, it becomes an emotional connection. And just as with men, we've all done it. A lot of the men in this room have dated the wrong person, and we knew it kind of, but the emotional triggers were switched. Well, for a woman, this is the problem. Once those triggers are switched, it's really hard then to walk away. It's really hard to step away because you've got a habit of connecting with the same type of guy over and over again. So when I work with ladies, what I have to do is I have to teach them how to screen. I mean, if one of your female friends shows up with a guy, you know straight away, right? If he's a douchebag or if he's a good guy. You can feel it. You know it. And you could tell her, but she can't. So it's one of the things ladies have to learn is how to screen men for the right kind of guy. The other thing they have to do is learn to screen him, to learn about him. Like, what are the traits that I keep tripping up on? Does he have them? Yes? Cool, it's nice to meet you. Got to go back to my girlfriends now. That's a sort of a very quick, snappy rundown of a woman's difficulty in dating. Women suffer just as much, if not more, than men with dating relationships. You guys may be surprised with that, but wow, the pain that the women go through is no more or less than what I deal with guys all the time.
What else we got, guys? 1 second.
Not a question, but just a comment perhaps in regards to now that you're coaching women for dating.
Yeah.
Your McDonald's example?
Yeah.
McDonald's sales were down 12% last quarter. It was attributed to millennials because they want to eat healthier and they're going to mainly Chipotles instead.
Yes, yes. Every big business is using this strategy. I picked McDonald's because they're the biggest and everyone knows it, and it had a funny image of McDonald's. But I'm not surprised they're going down. I secretly hope they go down further. But thank you for the input. It's good to see.
All right, gents, let's
Anything
give
else, guys?
a round of applause for this awesome guy.
Awesome.
Man, pleasure seeing you. Always great. You can find out more about you. Man, pleasure seeing you. Always great. You can find out more about you at the School of Attraction.
Absolutely.
And let's keep moving through the day.
Cheers, guys.